Hi, and welcome back to the Turning 30 podcast. Oh my God, we are back in business. I haven't recorded an episode of the podcast for almost 2 months while we've been on a prolonged summer break. And now we're back with a brand new season, and the podcast is bigger and better than ever before. And it feels so good to be finally reunited with my microphone. For those of you who are longtime listeners and you are used to tuning into the Turning 30 podcast, welcome back. And for those of you who are brand new and this is your first time hearing me or seeing me speaking on the podcast, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here as part of the Turning 30 community. So for those of you who are new, I want to give you a little trailer and a little background to who I am and what we do over here on the Turning 30 podcast. So I'm Emma. I'm 36 years old. I'm a life coach, a content creator, and the host of the Turning 30 podcast. And my purpose is to really help you to feel good and enjoy your 30s. This transitional time, entering your 30s, whether you're still in your 20s and you're listening, or whether you're already well into your 30s and like me, moving towards 40, this time in life is difficult. It's a transitional time. It's a time where so many things are changing. Our life from the outside sometimes looks the same, sometimes looks completely different to what we expected. And there are so many societal norms that dictate where we should be by this point in our life, what we should be doing, and how our lives should look. And so often we forget that what's important is how being in our 30s feels, how we feel about our lives. And that's exactly what I do in my work. I'm really here to dispel any of these pressures that you maybe feel are put on you at this time, and to help you embrace just living your own path, living your own timeline in your 30s. And I do this by running one-on-one coaching, group courses, retreats, lots of 30 related free content on my Instagram, also on my newsletter, and of course over here on the podcast. And whilst I do hang out every day on Instagram, the handle is Turning 30 Coach. And I recommend, if you've not already been there, to come and follow me. The most juicy content and where I really dive into the most details about turning 30 is over here on the podcast. And I do a mix of solo episodes where I just sit in front of the microphone and I ramble and I share and I give personal anecdotes and I share about clients and I share about just general things about turning 30. And I also host guests on a range of different topics, really from relationships and love to friendships to career and business and health, physical and mental. And I love these interviews and conversations. We really dive deep into so many topics that I know are so important to my audience and my listeners. So what's new around here? What's the big deal about this podcast? We've actually been running for over 3 years. The podcast was first launched back in August 2020. It was in the midst of the pandemic. I was fresh out of a breakup. I had been working on my business for years and I still hadn't really, let's say, made it. I wasn't yet a fully booked coach. And the podcast was something that I had a lot of resistance to. And one day in the shower where all my best ideas happened, I just said, right, let's go for it. Let's create a podcast. And the idea for these honest, candid conversations about turning 30 and being in your 30s was born. And that was 3 years ago. And since then we have had, I think at the moment, it's around 150,000 downloads. And up until now, it's all been on audio. And from now on, we are now doing video. A big, big, big change. I'm going to talk a little bit later in the episode about why this is such a big change for me and why I resisted it for so long. But the biggest thing now is that I have a YouTube channel. This is something that has been in the works for so long. I have wanted to create a YouTube channel for ages, and for all different reasons, it didn't work out. But now it's worked out. And I'm really, really excited to share with you that it's now live. So please, no matter where you listen to your podcast, I know that people have their own preferences, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or maybe you do listen on YouTube or all the other various platforms that you can use. Go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I'm going to be putting out exclusive content just on YouTube that won't even be on the podcast itself. And what I'm starting off with is a monthly Q&A where we're going to be diving into questions from you, from the audience, asking all different dilemmas, all different things, problems, issues, queries that you have about being in your 30s. And it's such a good opportunity for you if you like my community and you want to, get some help for free. It's really a chance to almost be coached by submitting a question. So at the end of this podcast episode, I will tell you how that you can submit a question and how you can be part of our exciting YouTube launch. So go ahead, go to the YouTube channel. In the bottom corner, you can click subscribe. And that way, when a new video comes out, you'll be notified and you'll be able to see not only the podcast episodes, but also clips that we're making of the podcast and also the Q&A, the exclusive Q&A that won't be put anywhere else, just on the YouTube channel. So in honor of the brand new series, I really wanted to record an update of what's really been going on with me and all the behind the scenes thing from the summer. And I also have a list of all these different topics that you've been voting on my Instagram stories that you want. And I decided to split these episodes. So I'm actually going to be doing a life update, an exciting life update separate to this, which you can go and view on the YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking all about the magic of fresh starts. A very, very apt topic that very much resonates with the fact that I am relaunching and restarting the podcast. It's the beauty of a fresh start. So let's dive in. So as I just said, I was really inspired to choose this theme because I really do feel like I'm going through my own fresh start. In general, my business has gone through a huge power jump, let's call it, in the past few months. It was about around May time. I had just been on my first ever official brand trip to Japan, which was just the trip of dreams. And as I got back, I decided to try something new with my content. I've been posting on Instagram literally almost every day, definitely every week, for over 5 years. And I had a gorgeous community there. The numbers, I've never been someone obsessed with figures, but I had it in my head that 2023 was going to be the year that my community went viral. And it was around the end of May, just after I got back from Japan, that Instagram just blew up for me. And I'm now almost at 90,000 followers, which is so exciting. And it's been a crazy summer. And it just means that things are really developing in my business and it's definitely bigger than it was before. So fresh start is just something that has happened without really even me planning it to and me expecting it, which is really, really fun. When I was thinking what I wanted to do for this episode, I was also really thinking about what themes have come up for me this summer, what topics have been important for me. And I ran my first ever retreat with my co-host Yelena back in August. So we're now in October. And the theme of the retreat was alignment, to come back into alignment. The theme of the retreat was really all about stepping into that truest version of yourself. And it was 13 women. We gathered together in Kent in the UK for 4 truly magical days of self-work and different practices. We did so many different things. And the biggest takeaway I had from the retreat was the magic and the beauty of just wanting something more, wanting a fresh start, wanting something different, wanting your life to look different, and then making the decision to go and make it happen. And it was so exciting to see there were women from really all over the world. We had a mix of women who had flown in from the US, and we had women from Europe and UK. And the women on the retreat, the clients, all of them were in different phases of life. So they were all in their 30s, I think, maybe a couple in their late 20s. But the theme really was making these big decisions, whether it was to change job, quit their current corporate job and start something new and create a new path, move country, move city, just going through big breakups. It was just so exciting and inspiring to see how many of them were just stepping up into this magic and this beauty of a fresh start. So that really gave me the idea to talk about it on the podcast, because I just love this concept and I speak about it loads in my content and lots in my coaching. And I even have a course called The Next Chapter, and it's all about designing your next chapter, and how over here at Turning 30, we don't just sit back and wait for things to happen. We're not passive. We're not just going to sit back and wait to be rescued and just think that things are going to change automatically. We're going to go out there and we're going to get things ourselves. We're going to create the way that we want things to be by our power. I call it being empowered, stepping up into that really autonomous role and not just sitting around and waiting. And lastly, the reason that I thought I wanted to talk about the magic of fresh starts is because of the time of the year. So whilst many people love the whole new year, new me in January, for me specifically, I love September and the change of the season, the end of the summer, as a time to create a fresh start. I celebrate the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, which has just gone by last week when I'm recording. And for me, it's just always an opportunity to look at the last year from September to September and see and evaluate what has happened and what I want to do differently. And I know for many people, even if you're not celebrating this holiday, it really is a time, most of us grew up in a school system from September to September. So we're used to that kind of back to school vibe and that feeling. It's just, for me, a really good time to reflect on what I want to change and what's coming up next, how I want to finish off the year, not with pressure, because I hate that whole, we've only got 3 months left, let's dive in. I'm not a fan and I don't subscribe to that rhetoric, but I love this concept of the autumn coming and bringing in a new energy and bringing in a fresh start. So what really is a fresh start? The way I perceive it is a fresh start is an opportunity and a chance to create a new reality, an opportunity to reset and to reinvent yourself. And something that I really often like to remind myself, and I think it's something that my coach has said to me repeatedly when I've been in a position of needing to move forward into my next chapter and maybe feeling some of that resistance to change, is that it only takes one moment, one chance with ourselves to sit with ourselves and say, I want to be different now. I am different now. And I think that many of us don't come from that mindset. We're kind of stuck in that fixed mindset of, I am the way I am. This is who I am. This is how I grew up. This is what I've been given. This is what there is for me. And we don't really think, okay, I have the power. I have the tools. I have everything that I need to just create a fresh start. So the way I see it is it's taking control of our lives and actually saying, okay, I really want something different now. And I think there are all different reasons why we have a fresh start or why we decide to initiate a fresh start. And I want to talk firstly about the kind of fresh start that is thrust upon us, the one where it does feel like it's out of control, the one where we actually maybe didn't expect it to happen or we didn't want it to happen. And these are the fresh starts that are forced upon us. And that when a circumstance suddenly shifts and changes, the most obvious one coming to mind is going through a big breakup, could be losing your job, moving apartment, can also be health changes, something that's happened that you weren't anticipating. And these kinds of fresh starts that are thrust upon us so unexpectedly are difficult, because sometimes we didn't even realize that we need them. We often have fresh starts that come around, and I know this has happened to me when I've gone through a breakup where I didn't realize when it happened just how much I was craving that fresh start. I really, really needed it and wanted it, but I wasn't in my power to choose it. It did happen to me at the time. But sometimes the fresh starts come out of the blue and we just didn't realize. And I always like to, maybe it's a little bit idealistic and maybe it's a bit optimistic, but I always like to think that when these fresh starts are thrust upon us, they are the universe's way of telling us that it's time to welcome in something new, time to welcome in a new energy. And the problem happens here when we try and resist that, when we try and think, no, I didn't want this to happen. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And truly, honestly, it's arguing with reality. There's a famous Byron Katie quote. Byron Katie is a very famous life coach. And she says something like, when we argue with reality, we lose, but only 100% of the time. And I think that's really true because, we want to take time to grieve and accept and to digest the new changes. I'm not saying that we need to, run forward and be like, okay, cool, that's happened, let's just move on. But I think it's all about really accepting those changes as something that, even though we may not know right now and we might not understand until much further into the future, but for some reason, this was supposed to happen. And I'll be honest and tell you that some of the best moments in my life have come following unexpected big breakups, where I've had my heart completely crushed and my life completely changed, a whole 180 in an instant. But it has forced me to step up, and it has forced me to try something completely new and go down a new path that I didn't know about. So if that's you and you're struggling to come to terms with a fresh start that was not expected or that you didn't necessarily want, really try and focus on that feeling of it working out and it's happening for you and not to you. And the second type of fresh start is when it wasn't thrust upon you and you choose it. And I think these are the fresh starts that are sometimes more complicated to recognize. Sometimes they're more complicated to know if that's what we really want. If there isn't a specific reason that you are having a fresh start, how do you know that you're ready for one? I hear that a lot. A lot of my community ask me, how do I know that I'm ready to change? And firstly, and most obviously, I think if you're asking the question, then it's probably because you want to change in some way. You're probably just being called to a fresh start. You maybe subconsciously, and it's just starting to sneak into your consciousness, just feel ready for a shift, ready for something new. Maybe you're stuck in a rut. Okay, so this is also something, a whole other topic. I've recorded previous podcast episodes on this, and I definitely have been stuck in a rut I actually have been out of it now for quite a few weeks, but I had a very funky end of August when I just got back from my UK month, my monthly trip. And it's when you're just feeling like nothing's working out, like it's a stuck energy. And you probably feel that you're just in like maybe a dark place. That's where I was. I didn't really feel like myself. But also it could just feel a bit boring, just the feeling of being stuck. And maybe it's also sometimes for some people a really comfortable place. It's very, very safe to be stuck in a rut and it feels very comfortable. But I think listen to those internal twinges, those internal changes are saying to you that you want something more, that you're craving something more. And another way to identify if you are ready for a fresh start is to listen to your body. So often we forget how much our body signals us and tells us when it's ready for something more. So maybe you're feeling more anxious than usual, maybe you're restless, maybe you can't sleep, maybe you're really out of your routine. Maybe your mood and energy isn't what it once was. Maybe energy is really low. It could be really high if you're feeling hyper. Maybe you're moody. It could be hormonal. Obviously, I know most of my listeners are women. And obviously, it's monthly changes that we sometimes don't have control over. But it's if you are noticing that it's been weeks now and months where you just feel this like general feeling of being like almost like pulled under the water, then it could be that you're just inviting in a change, inviting in a fresh start. And thirdly, maybe you've just been cocooning. So I love this analogy of the butterfly coming from the caterpillar. And it's like that kind of time before the fresh start where you just with yourself, maybe you've been keeping yourself to yourself more, wanting to spend more time alone, pulling away from family and friends. And for me, that always happens just before I'm about to go through a big change. Sometimes when I don't even know that I'm about to go through a big change, I often cocoon in the comfort of my own house. And I always think it's a sign that a change is on the horizon. And, maybe you're in a phase of deep reflection. Maybe you've just started this journey of listening to podcasts and reading some self-help books and looking at posts on Instagram and maybe even signing up for a course or something. And usually that's your intuition pushing you and telling you that you're ready for a next chapter. So just want to summarize this and remind you that whether it's forced or whether it's chosen, a fresh start is available to you at any time that you want. I guess, you've tuned into the podcast. It's the Turning 30 podcast. So you're probably asking, why a fresh start at 30? And it's funny because I really think that it's not to do with age, because we can, like I said before, we can choose a fresh start at any point, at any time. But I also really believe that a birthday, whether it's your 30th or another birthday around this time, is an amazing signpost to have a fresh start. So I don't think that if you're about to have a birthday in 4 months, you should just sit back and say, okay, I'm not going to do anything. It's my birthday in 4 months. I'll just enjoy where I am till now. Definitely not. But on the flip side, if you have a birthday coming up, then maybe it's been really motivating you to get into this reflective mood and to ask these big questions. And for me, I love birthdays as a chance for a fresh start. And I love the opportunity to say, okay, like this is like the bookend of this, especially for me, 30, 33 and 35, they were all huge opportunities for fresh starts. So I've been reflecting when I was thinking about this episode that obviously this is a fresh start in my business now, but the last time I had a huge personal fresh start was really linked to my birthday. Obviously, I'm the turning 30 coach. Birthdays are a big deal for me. That's the reason why I entered into this realm and this niche. It was because I was kind of obsessed with birthdays and aging, and 30 was a big one for me, but 35 really hit home. It really hit hard that I was entering the second part of my 30s. And it was a few months before, I've spoken about this quite a few times on the podcast, that I just was feeling unsettled and I was feeling really ready for a change, but I definitely didn't run for a fresh start. It wasn't like, okay, now I'm ready. There was a lot of reflection, a lot of evaluation, a lot of cocooning. I actually took some time off work and spent a lot of time with myself and really understanding. And I was very stagnant at that point. I was very stuck. The energy was very stuck in my life. And it took a while, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, of what to do when it's stuck and you're not ready for that next step. But what came on the other side of that was some amazing decisions. And that was when I froze my eggs. That was when I made a decision to stay put and not travel anywhere for a while, which is a big one for me, to completely change my dating mindset and to really manifest and call in the love that I was looking for and wanting at this point. And I made some huge changes, and my life really drastically changed a few months after my 35th birthday. So I want to talk a little bit about what might stop you from having a fresh start. And I think the biggest thing that might stop you is the feeling of fear, the uncertainty of not knowing. It's very, very scary when you don't know what's coming next. And I think that the feeling of the unknown, as humans, we really resist. Most of us, not all of us, but many of us like to know what's going to happen. We like to know, okay, in this month we're going to do this, and then we're going to go here, and then it's going to work out, and then we're going to get this job, and then we're going to be paid this much. And that's just humans. We just are conditioned to want to have certainty. And when we think of a fresh start, many of us may feel that we're ready for it, but we don't know what's about to come. So then we don't pursue it because it feels much safer, much more comfortable to stay in our comfort zone. So I think that's a big one. Just fear of change in general. Fear that if we try something new, then maybe we're going to lose something from the past that was serving us, and we're going to develop into someone else. Maybe we fear losing a relationship. So if we decide, okay, actually where I am right now isn't good, but I want to change, maybe we're afraid that our partner isn't going to keep up with us, or our family isn't going to accept us anymore, or maybe our friends who are so stuck in their ways and they're a certain type and they have their habits and things that they're not going to be able to keep up with us. And I was actually speaking to a client about this who she'd really discovered like the world of self-help and coaching, and she was like making all these amazing changes, and she was really, really into her fresh start. She'd already started it, but her best friends, her group of 5 girlfriends who she hung out with all of the time and most weekends, weren't there, and they were still in a different place to her, and they were partying and then doing lots of drugs and drinking a lot. And she was really ready to let that part of her life really subside for now, and she wanted to be more healthy and be more mindful about the way that she was living. And her party days, she felt less connected to that version of herself, but she was really nervous because it meant that having to let go of her social life. So that's another thing that might stop you, is that fear of changing into something else and leaving other people or leaving old versions of yourself behind. And I think it's hard sometimes because when we think about having a fresh start, we mostly think about and consider scrapping the old version of us and just becoming someone new, completely new, almost like movie montage and like a Hollywood movie. They're going to like have a Clueless style makeover, lots of cool music in the background. Someone's going to be doing your hair. And then that's it. You walk out and you're a new person. Many people want to signify a fresh start by getting a new haircut or maybe getting some new clothes, which I think is a lovely idea and I'm all for it. It's not that simple. It's not like click and we're just going to be that person. And I think that that can put us off changing when we think that we're not going to be brand new. And something that came up on the retreat, which was a beautiful conclusion to one of the sessions that we had, was how much stepping into the next version of yourself, into an aligned, fresh start, is shedding off layers and becoming back to your original self. Now, that doesn't mean to go and chase a version of yourself that you love from the past, because often we have rose-tinted glasses about who that version is. No, it's not about that. But it's about understanding that often the core of who we are, our values, our goodness, was there in our childhoods and sometimes in our teenage years. And then we learn different things from society. We learn things in our job. We learn things in our university. We learn things from friends. We learn things from TV. And then we build up all these layers, and a lot of becoming the new best version of yourself is stripping back those layers. Literally imagine like peeling back an onion. And that was a beautiful realization from some of the clients on the retreat. And I love that idea because it takes away that pressure of the fresh start needing to be completely brand new. But what if you're ready to step away from that old version of yourself, but you're not really sure about the next version? So I think that's a time and a place where we get really, really stuck about having a fresh start. And it's so funny because I was speaking to a client about this in a session, somebody who's going through this kind of caterpillar butterfly renewal, which so many of my clients are going through at the moment. And she referenced a quote from the TV show And Just Like That, the spin-off from Sex and the City. And we were laughing because we were like, the show does not deserve to be quoted anywhere. But there was a really nice line in it from the character Che in the last episode, says something along the lines of, I know that I'm not the old version of myself, but I've just no clue about who I'm becoming. And she said, wow, I resonate with that so much. Like, I know I'm in that phase of being someone more and becoming someone more, but I just have no idea how that looks. And I just really resonate with that. I think that's a really, almost like that in-between phase can be really, really hard. And there was a quote that I actually came across, I think it was the same week that me and my client were in discussion about it. And it's from a man called Marcus Alvarado. And he says, you aren't lost. You're just in an uncomfortable stage of life where your old self is gone, but your new self isn't fully formed yet. You're in the midst of transformation. So I really love that, because when you put pressure on yourself to immediately change, it can be very claustrophobic. And actually, when we're in that pressure, I always like to imagine it like a pressure cooker. We often can't change for the best because we're too stressed, we're too anxious. But when we just accept that a transformation is coming and we don't need to know exactly when, then that can really, really help us to move into the new energy, move into the next version of ourselves. So don't force the fresh start. And I actually have to say that when it was my 35th birthday and I had that time, I did take, I think it was around a month of deep reflection for myself and stepping back and cocooning to really think about how to have that fresh start. And even with the podcast, I really was ready to already go to video and do it this summer. And I on purpose said, let's have a break. Sometimes just having a little step back is actually going to serve us more. So that's just some advice. If you're feeling that resistance and the fear of change and uncertainty, let it come naturally, let it flow, and it will come. But let's say you're ready for a fresh start, you're cool to it, you're ready, you're listening, you're like, Emma, I'm ready. What now? Tell me what to do. And my suggestion here is to embrace a new routine. Really think about the old version of you and why you want the fresh start, what you want to let go of, what you want to bring forward, and what you want to see that's different. Really have a think about what your intentions are. Why is this fresh start important to you? What's not working? Really do a life evaluation. I love doing this with clients. I love it, thinking about what's not been working, what has been working, what are the layers of yourself that you want to shed, and what are the new things that you want to incorporate. And a new routine, like literally a daily routine, is a really, really good way to signal a new version of you. And it should be really simple. Honestly, simple, simple, simple. It should be a few things. Don't pick more than 5 things that you want to change. Add in a 10-minute per day journal practice where you can reflect on the next chapter and start to do this mindset work around it. If you want to make some healthy changes, maybe it's going to be no iPhone, no phone before bed. Maybe it's going to be a quick walk every day if you work from home, or even if you work in the office and you want some fresh air. There can be loads of different things. I'm not going to go into them all now, but I say make a list and come up with some things that you want to be different. The changes, the long-term changes, always start with the small everyday habits. And I also like the concept of making some promises to yourself. So I did a reel in September, the 1st of September, that actually went kind of viral, that was saying promises I'm making to myself for September. And I lifted those promises straight out of my journal. And it got hundreds and thousands of views, and people were really messaging me saying, oh, I love the idea of making promises. And I just did it for October, where it's October the 1st today, in my journal practice this morning. And I think I'll make a reel about it later on. And I think it's a really great idea to make a list of some promises that you want to make to yourself about things that are going to be different. I would also really recommend you to, instead of looking at the fresh start as like before and after, like my life up until 36 years old and then my life from here, look at it like smaller, on a microcosm. So think, okay, how's my life going to be different in the next week? Or how's my life going to be different in the next month? And maybe even in the next few months, if you want to think big. But don't think about, okay, from now on, forever to eternity, because we'll go back to that place of pressure. One thing that I will say is that having a fresh start does take commitment. It takes discipline, and it also takes decision making. To, you know, go back to the girls on the retreat and what they were going through, and they decided to make a change. They had to make decisions. It wasn't like, okay, I want to change and want a fresh start. It was about really thinking, okay, what's this big decision that's coming up? The moving country, the going through a breakup, the moving jobs, the quitting jobs. And it was like, let's make a list of all the small things I can already start to do, like literally little steps, little chunks that then would result in the ease of a bigger decision coming through. So I would really recommend having a little reflection about what decisions you're not currently making, what decisions you're sitting on, what you're putting off, and what decisions you would need to make to put this fresh start into reality. And here I just want to say something that I think there's this incorrect perception and notion that if we make decisions to become into our aligned version of ourselves, or to have a fresh start that we really want, that it's going to be easy. And the truth is, it's never easy, because we're getting out of our comfort zones, and our comfort zones are literally, I like to imagine myself in my comfort zone on a squishy pillow, on a cloud, all warm and comfortable. And when you get out of your comfort zone and have a new routine, have to make decisions, have to act differently, have to commit to doing new things, the outcome is that we have to get off that fluffy cloud, literally get off, and it feels really uncomfortable. So I really wanted to reiterate that just having a fresh start isn't always like, you know, rainbows and fairies and roses and dancing in a field with daffodils. And just as an example, this podcast, the reason I was resisting it for so long was that it's way more comfortable for me to put my microphone on without my camera, no makeup, hair not done, doesn't matter what I'm wearing, could have had a bad night's sleep, and just speak into the camera, and no one has to see me, not a big deal. Even when I do guest episodes, I would speak to the guests on video, but the video was never going to go anywhere. And all of a sudden now I have to set the room up, and I have to have the microphone in place, and I have to have my hair looking not like a bird's nest on my head. And probably that will actually, as the podcast goes on, I'm sure I'm going to feel more comfortable with the video. But for me, video is really uncomfortable. I don't like putting the video on and putting my face in front of it and staring at myself for hours on end. But this is the compromise and the sacrifice of calling in a fresh start. And I want to enhance my podcast. I want to grow my community. And that is one way to do it. So don't resist getting out of your comfort zone, because even if you have to make new uncomfortable promises to yourself, the end result, I promise you, is going to be better than staying where you are. So many of my clients signified their fresh start by signing up for a coaching course. And I think that's a really perfect way to be accountable to a fresh start. Accountability can come in all different shapes and sizes. It can be from calling a family member and sharing it. It can be from telling a friend. It can be from posting it on social media. But actually, when you invest in yourself, it's the perfect way to signal a fresh start, to commit to doing that deeper work. And a client this week, I'm actually running a waiting list at the moment for one-on-one coaching, and she signed up a month ago, and I just got a voice note from her a few days ago saying, oh my God, Emma, don't know what came over me, but I've decided to quit my job before we even start the coaching. And it happens all the time. And I was so happy and proud of her for doing it. And I think that sometimes we just have to go all in on ourselves. And when we make those big investments, that's when we really do it. And one of my most memorable fresh starts, so we're back now. It was just after the podcast was launched, so 2020, and I just was post this big breakup. One of my most memorable decisions, like kind of big decisions that I made, was I was on a flight back. I'd been on a trip to Greece with some friends, and I'd just been back to the UK to visit family, and I was in Paris on a layover in the airport. And I'd been mulling for ages over investing in this course. It was a few $1,000s. It was a lot of money. And at the time, I didn't have any money. I was really in my overdraft. I was really stressed. I was just living alone for the first time. I was in a bad financial position. And I'd been mulling over whether to start this business course, which is going to help me to get clients and help me to sell coaching. And I've really felt like it was the right thing, but I was resisting it. I was really, really nervous. And I just ripped off that plaster, and it was incredible. It was just a new era that really signified a fresh start. And I look back now, and it was such a time of inviting in a new energy. And thank God for that version of me who was so, bold and willing to step up and invest in myself and believe, because it literally was about 4 weeks after that I started to fully book my coaching business. And by the end of that year, that was in September 2020, by January 2021, I was in a completely different place on a solo traveling trip in Costa Rica with a fully booked roster of clients and just loving life. So I don't know if it would have happened, or maybe would have happened in a different way, but I'm just so grateful that I'm getting emotional talking about it, that I called in that fresh start. And that's a really nice way to finish the episode of the magic of fresh starts can just be so profound. And if you're feeling called to it, please, please, please go and create your fresh start. And as always, you can tell me about your fresh start or what's going on with you by reaching out to me on Instagram. I'm always there in my DMs. I really try to get back to as many of you as possible. So please feel free to reach out. So as I mentioned at the start of the episode, we are now live on YouTube. And every month I'm going to be doing a live YouTube Q&A with your questions that you've submitted about being in your 30s, any dilemmas that you have, anything you're going through, any guidance that you need, all for free. And if you're listening to this and you have a question that you want to submit, then you can do it in two different ways. You can either DM me on Instagram at turning30coach, the 30 are the numbers 30, or you can email me at emma@coachingwithemma.com. I'll also put that email address in the podcast show notes. And just to remind you to subscribe if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening, whichever podcast platform, please subscribe so that you can be the first to know when a new episode drops. I'm reminding you to head on over to YouTube. Let's get the YouTube channel going and help me on my mission to get the Turning 30 podcast into the most amount of ears as possible, and eyes now as well, seeing as we're now video. And lastly, I'll just say thank you so much for being here with me on this journey. This podcast is such a passion project of mine. I absolutely love it. Even despite having to now put some makeup on and do my hair to sit here with you all, I just love it so much. And I'm so happy for this new season. We've got some amazing episodes coming up. I'm going to be giving some exciting life updates that you'll definitely want to tune into. I have an episode coming out on turning 30 and getting divorced, turning 30 and changing your hormones and your menstrual cycle. We have episodes on loneliness, how to find your purpose, how to escape a mundane life. These are all requests that I've had from you, from the community, and I'm bringing it to life in the next month. So I'll see you all on the podcast next week.